Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mapping India Retail Leadership Series, Episode 7. Today, I have an amazing leader who has been transforming this entire world of digital space, Naveen. Naveen Joshua. He is the co founder and director of leading full stack D2C enabler Green Honchos. With more than 20 years of experience, Naveen is an active advisor to several D2C brands in India and is a regular contributor to industry forums. Welcome, Naveen.
Thank you very
I would
much.
uh,
Please go.
so Naveen, let me start with what is Green Honchos and what it does, because I think it's better to start with that so that all of our viewers get an understanding of what you guys do, what is it that you're contributing in this space, and how have you been transforming this space.
Excellent, Ranjan. Thanks for that very kind introduction. Would love to do more and contribute more than I currently do to this in amazing India e-commerce ecosystem. But love to talk more about Green Honchos. We've actually been around for quite a while now. The last 4 to 5 years has been pretty active. We are work with brands, retailers who could be anywhere in their e-commerce roadmap and drive them to scale through an engaging online commerce experience. So we do have a consulting framework as well. The big challenge of how to scale one e-commerce is where we come in. We also have a headless commerce platform called Cartmax that helps e-retail brands solve significant challenges that come with scale, which is where the India ecosystem is right now.
Great, Naveen. Let me first start with what is this D2C story all about? There's so much of talk around it. There's so much of discussion around this. Is it a bubble?
Yeah, no, I think lots of action, especially during the pandemic and onwards. The entire format of retail has been queuing up to really figure this out better. But I think great point when you talk about, is it here to stay? Is it a phenomena that is has a particular shelf life, and brand need to get onto this bandwagon quickly, but only in the short term? My take on this, and probably because we come more from the D2C enablement side, could be slightly biased as well. But basically, we're building businesses around the challenges that we are betting on, and it comes on the back of a lot of research. I do believe that in the normal course, this D2C journey was anyway taking place. There was a lot of research around where it would be, let's say by 2025, when all the research reports came out in 2019, 2020. The last 18 months has seen that fast forward into the size of the market as it was predicted for being in 2025. I think, exit FY 21-22 is when those numbers undeniably will get hit. So there's a particular maturity and a journey that a market is used to. But the great ecosystem that India is, and what unfortunately the pandemic has done, is it has accelerated that adoption significantly. And all the helter skelter and scurry right now in with brands as well as the ecosystem is how to bring in that change much quicker than the normal gestation period of a journey. So I think the much talked about, or rather the much hyped Thrasio model as well, really stems from solving that problem itself, where brands that are stuck, or let's say a more positive word, that are in a stage where they are small to medium and are really looking to take the right steps of having the right kind of team, the right kind of tech, the right kind of digital approach, could typically take a few years. But if we have to accelerate that, or brands want to do that, that is when getting partnered with the right teams is become ever more essential in the Indian context. So, where, brands could be incubated or partnered through technology, digital systems transformation, where brands can focus on their core, which is, really what we're all selling, which is the product, the pricing, the differentiation, the audience segmentation, the repeat customer being served. That's what great brands want to be able to focus their time effort on, and hopefully depend on the enabler ecosystem to walk them through, that journey. So, a little more on that is, we believe that this is not just a fad, because at one point we talked about the maturity of the supply ecosystem, but the other big part is the demand generation. The customer in the last 18 months has adopted multiple channels of consuming content digitally. There's been even a larger age segment that has now adopted, whether it is grocery or essentials or baby care. It's brought in this whole new era and genre of consumers online. And that is a prepaid credit card savvy consumer that is able to trust and depend on a lot of mature service providers through the digital channels. That's really helped, the growth of this entire space. Even something as random as the emergence of content consumption via OTT platforms has spanned all age segments. And so even digital ads or customer acquisition channels have become a more data-driven, pinpointed approach of driving an interaction of customer cohorts. So even the landscape of media buying or media consumption has, even for large digital conglomerates, has moved online. So, long story short, it's a very strong bubble that doesn't seem to be bursting anytime soon.
That's an amazing answer, Naveen, and that's so positive. I'm sure this is going to give a lot of soothing effect to people who are trying to get into this space, who have jumped onto this bandwagon, thinking that this is going to be the next big thing.
Right.
But they also, at the back of the mind, have the fear that whether it is here to stay or it is just another bubble. That takes me to the next question, which is very, very interesting and which has been talked about a lot. The omni-channel space. It's been one of the most abused terms for quite a long time. But then, what do you think? Are we doing a real omni-channel, or are we doing multi-channel today with most of the brands and the retailers that we're trying to do?
Yeah, no, I think so you said it. The first part of my answer would be abused or probably misquoted in many ways, because as a perception, there are a few things. In the global context, the term omni-channel is more omni experience for the consumer. In the Indian context, omni-channel is really omni fulfillment. So that really is one huge detour, because the supply chain, and you being a supply chain expert would also understand it, has traditionally been broken in India, especially when you talk about multiple channels of commerce. There hasn't been any unified, thought process into inventory, and therefore omni fulfillment became the prerequisite. Omni commerce or omni experience will actually happen once omni fulfillment is in place. So we are in that phase one of omni channel. In the global context, India is right at the start there. But now, taking that back even further, I think there was always cross channel, which then became multi channel, and then became omni channel. So cross channel was, let's say, when we were kids, and we went to the shop, something wasn't available, you would say, "Bhai, hum ghar bhej denge." Cross channel for decades, and the last generation really trusted that. There was a real connection, and all repeat customer purchase, etc., happened due to that trust of cross channel. So the multi-channel has come into play when the customer is getting served through multiple channels, but independently and selectively. You know, so it is a very company or business-centric approach of reaching the consumer through mass mediums. When you want, let's say, if you want to roll out an offer, so you push that out through a multi-channel communication, but it is one way. You decide you have to push that offer out, Independence Day offer, to everyone, and you could do that across your channels. So the customer experience though and the data flow is single channel. You push out something, you try and evince some interest, and then you bring in sale, engagement, whatever could be the objective or the metric of that multi-channel move. That multi-channel could be email, it could be SMS, it could be in-app notifications, it could be flyers, it could be an offline print ad, and it could be all of them with the same message or multiple messaging. Omni commerce really is a slightly more evolved experience, and I do believe that when we talk about it being abused, is because we've not really scratched that surface at all. When in terms of, let's say, interactive communication or selective communication basis, the customer's engagement with you, which portion in the journey or the funnel has that customer consumed you from? How do we provide uniformity or seamlessness in that communication of the consumer experience is what I think eventually we would go to as true omni-channel. Very, very few examples of that being done well. And not because no one understands it, because every market has a particular nascency and evolution, and this market is going there too. So getting the inventory omni number one priority. Those who have done that well have been able to scale their commerce with that significant exposure of inventory online. And we do know in India, the concept of sell-through is directly linked to the exposure of healthy inventory. Some of the challenges that come with doing true inventory is, let's say, traditional players or players that have strong distribution, pricing parity. How do you manage the distributor network? Do we need to have a different range for online? Do we need to go -1 season for online? These are all, they're really not skeletons in the closet any longer. They are known secrets or open secrets. Once these converge better, I think then true omni-channel will come into the picture.
Amazing, Naveen. So now we are almost still there in the middle of the pandemic. There's so much happening, so much of uncertainty. What's your take on how has omnichannel helped retailers or brands? Could you give me some perspective pre-pandemic, within the pandemic? How has it helped? Because a lot of stores were shut.
Right.
People were not able to go and shop from there. The retailers could not sell the merchandise. How has this been helping them to be able to sell the merchandise, being able to generate some revenue and still be there in the business?
I think through some truly amazing experiences and innovation we have seen in the last, rhetorically 18 months now, because that's a significant time frame in our lives where we've actually seen the onset of a pandemic. So it has caused for reinvention of the rule books, so to speak. Extremely glad to have worked with a few of them through these journeys in the last 18 months. So whether it is your traditional public listed companies or large retailers like the V2s and the V-Marts we work closely with and actually championed their D2C scale in this short time frame. Otherwise, there was a lot of pace challenges within the organization, but with stores shut, that repurposing of all that store inventory quickly. We really had a totally different experience, because before that we were more, Greenonzo was more working with online first brands. But when retail traditional brands came online and were able to do something, the conversion rates they got, the repeat purchases they got, the click to impressions they got was at a totally different level. They were able to even do commerce of, let's say, an average selling price point of 500 rupees at significant return on ad spend, because the amount of data and trust and location based commerce that we were able to drive because of loyalty that they had driven over the last few decades offline was actually a learning for us. When we were working with these traditional strong brands, a lot of them were telling us, "Aap online leke to jaiye hame." And then, we kept saying, "Oh no, these price points and this and that." And then, we were all super excited to really see, thousands of orders a day from month one. We scaled someone up to even 8,000 orders a day, pretty much within the first 3 months itself. So that was the strength of their product, their customer recall, their pricing sharpness, their understanding of hinterland consumer. And we just had to serve the right technology and digital platform, really. We couldn't do magic. The magic was there. We just gave a forum of it to be able to, and it did obviously surprise everyone in terms of the speed of action. We've seen, and I did name a couple of them. There's, and I'll name a few more, good use cases. There's this, retailer called in Andhra called Popular Shoe Mart. You go and you'd realize the power of regional commerce when you see that in a region, someone has 160 points of sale. And, they had huge investments in the back end. They had, SAP, they had everything, the works. And we had to develop a technology system for them, which obviously integrated with their entire ERP, no doubt, but which was also unique in nature. They wanted each of their stores to actually have seller panels so that we would digitally generate orders from across, but fulfillment would happen hyper local. So it wasn't even omni-channel, but all centralized orders were pushed to stores, and they only wanted to market in and around that geography. So we had the stores hugely becoming positive about that time, and stores started bringing in so much business because of the affinity factor they had with their locality, that it actually ended up teaching us a lot as digital experts going in, but really unlocking that potential. So that was another great learning for us. We mobilized the digital and tech platform for another mall management company in the south in Karnataka called Lighthouse Malls. What they did is they went to certain geographies and closed brands in localities, brought them on with inventory from that particular location, and promised a 2-hour delivery to all consumers across. So whether they were grocery brands or meat brands, or whether they were beauty, apparel, basically it was exposing that particular store, let's say in Koramangala. And so the customer knew that it was coming from there. They could actually select the store that they were getting it from. So all these innovative models actually came from traditional offline. And we just opened up commerce to be able to cater to such variable models. And, that marry, I feel was truly, invigorating for the businesses as well as us, because we feel that digital first brands is what the D2C rush is about. But be careful, because traditional retail and the strength and power of those brands or retailers in those locations will really be able to give a superb, fight to the entire D2C ecosystem.
That's amazing to see so many new models evolving during the pandemic and people trying out. That's the beauty, because people who are ready to try out, people who are ready to experience, people who are ready to innovate and do newer things. That's so amazing to understand.
Well, in
This
fact,
yeah
yeah, sorry.
yeah. Go ahead, Naveen.
In fact, even Metro Brands did a similar implementation. In fact, it is an award-winning implementation in the last 12 months where Mochi as a brand, we took online with a superior customer experience, one of the highest conversion rates that the industry knows of in that category. And also the omni-channel was done in a manner where, they wanted to, even as much as on the product detail page, be able to show the consumer that you could actually pick up this order from these stores. It was store wise inventory that was mobilized on the product detail page. So it wasn't just only inventory, it actually gave the consumer the opportunity to select whether he wanted to pick up at store or wanted to be delivered online. It did two, three things. It ensured that the return rate would be less because the collection of the article and the payment would be at the POS. So there was POS integration. They did not have to have the logistics cost as well incurred. In fact, they were able to pass that on as an SOP to the consumer. So the consumer that was close by was happy to be able to, know that the pickup or the return location could be a store nearby. So I mean, some very very cool benefits that offline consumers were able to extend to their online consumers in a 24/7 format.
Great. This also drives us to the next area in terms of the customer experience. So how and I'm sure a lot of these online retailers have been pushing for customer acquisition.
Mhm.
What is the fine balance? What's the strategy around what should come first? Whether the consumer experience should come first or the customer acquisition should always be the first priority?
Uh, so yeah, this is the classic. Whether in organizations you call it the battle between sales and marketing. So everyone wants their budgets and everyone thinks they drive the business. So very similar in a different context here. I think what has happened in India in this past 7-8 years is that, let's say, Amazon and Myntra and Flipkart, now even Nykaa, even Ajio, have actually Tata Click have actually driven the levels of customer experience and what consumers have gone to expect. Almost all of them either own their fulfillment experience, some even own their own payment gateways to ensure that end to end of the consumer experience is something that they could manage and control. So customers have rightfully got spoiled for that choice in terms of best in class. So that's a huge barrier for new age players to set up their D2C. And that is extremely important to get right because the consumer, in terms of the cost of customer acquisition for the new consumer, you'd still be able to drive the first consumer through great ads, great storytelling, narrative, advertisement, fundraising. All of these could get you your, first order where you'd say, okay, let's try. The challenge is, there is no first order unit economics in the e-commerce business, right? It is based on repeat consumers, serving the consumer, ensuring that we come to that, the holy grail, which is customer experience. So, in the past, I think, the consumer was more from the information age. They knew, they searched, they went. But now, the consumer is largely in the digital and social age. So, even managing engagement through all channels, through multi-channel, is where real business is beginning to happen. So we can't be off the ball as businesses in figuring out where all our consumers are, because we can't only bring them to the website to transact. Every stage of the order till the time it is received in the hands of a consumer needs to be informed. But The bigger challenge on that, when we talk about customer acquisition versus customer experience, is the fact that the ugly truth is that nearly 25 to 30% of everything that goes out comes in. So, managing the return experience or exchange experience is where most, companies are actually struggling, because that has nothing to do really with the customer acquisition. The business says, you know what, customer acquisition is gross, whereas the business is net. Everything that happens in between. So, we keep talking to logistics companies all the time because they're part of our ecosystem, the likes of ShipRocket, ShipLite, Delivery, Shipway. Because for us, as we sit more on the brand side as we also, and we are really trying to look at that entire funnel right till the net. And we are incentivized on that, right? Because we are part of the business. So, and we are continuously trying to figure out why is there so much drip. And one day, one of these co-founders from a large logistics company comes back and tells me, why are you not getting the right quality of customers through marketing? If it was the right customer, they're obviously ordering and we deliver it. So it did turn it on its head, because truly speaking, that's fair too. We can't just say that marketing and experience or returns is siloed. It has to be seamless. We need to talk together and work together. Otherwise, we'll keep trying to aim only for much higher return on ad spend. However, the quality is through the drip. So there's no point putting in more marketing dollars into the cost of customer acquisition unless the customer experience is well managed at each part of the drip.
Great. This is amazing. So obviously, when there's so much happening in this space, in the e-commerce space, there are a lot of innovations also happening. There are a lot of emerging technologies which are also catching a rise, and they definitely have an utility in that space.
Sure.
Could you help us to understand some of the emerging technologies which is transforming the space?
Sure. The last part of this conversation, I think it's fairly invigorating for us to throw something out on the table so that whoever has access to this content gets a good takeaway from here on the technology enablement side. I do believe that we are definitely talking about this as the age of content-driven commerce. It is a journey from content to commerce. No matter how much performance marketing you push, it is going to become an overcrowded market. And it already is, if not, it's not waiting to happen. It's already there. The differentiation that the brands can create through high engagement, high touch point, high click to impression kind of visibilities is where we are seeing some brands and retailers really setting themselves apart. Again, a fairly misquoted or misunderstood area is AI. But true AI, whether it is content-driven AI, which is more chatbot-driven, or whether it is conversational AI, I believe that getting sharper and sharper, because from the information to the digital age, we do have a lot of footprint, and that's where it slightly differentiates itself from the offline. Because that data is becoming extremely interesting to churn around and really figure out the value of investing in those specific customer journeys. And each journey needs to have different narratives served for higher conversion. So, so AI, many platforms are now working on inbuilt AI, and that could also be AI not just in the consumer, but there's also AI you can do at the catalog level. What you need to show, how you need to show it. You've got cookies or data points of location for sure. Especially since most of the access is happening on a mobile, which has location. So there is no reason to show all sets of consumers, the catalog consistently. There have to be ways where you're able to play them around. for higher conversions. We've done these A/B testings and they've had a tremendous impact. So let's say something like fashion trends, styles, open footwear versus closed, Western wear versus ethnic wear. We know India is such a diverse geography. What if we could actually serve that content to demographics, not just in ads that we anyway do, but also on the platform? So that is one emerging trend that will continue to explode. One of those things that in the last few years we've been trying to do in house, and we have dedicated tech practices on that. I believe that the platform business needs to and will go truly headless. We have a lot of CMSs, and that we've used across, in times, from the Shopify to the Magentos to the WooCommerces to all the known. They were all built in an age that was actually not mobile first, but they have evolved to become adaptive and responsive. But in many ways, their table structure and their module structure has been monolithic. And now, as times go and D2C has seen much faster scale, I believe that there's a lot of retrofitting going on to make the monolithic architecture towards headless, but it's not truly headless. Truly headless would be a complete service-oriented architecture. We can say, okay, I'm on X platform, but I want to use the product management system of this. I'm on Y platform, but I want to use the search algo of this. I like the catalog system. I like the promotion system of this. I want to scale seamlessly, and I want to descale also. So you would want to utilize each of them in a headless environment. So Cartmax, our brainchild product, has been used by a lot of our clients in a headless architecture, and we are seeing how it enables conversion straight. It is a true, and it's not just about us, but we see, that being an emerging tech methodology. So yeah, we talked about AI, we talked about headless, and the last two that I would leave and probably talk about together on the table is social commerce and live commerce. So we've seen other such emerged markets and emerging markets like China, etc., take that on fairly, because it's very Instagrammy in nature. It's very connected in nature, and I do think connected and digital device and having methods of social commerce and live commerce getting activated over the next couple of years will also then tie in AI more seamlessly. So these are emerging tech trends, Ranjan, that we foresee and are placing our bets on and working on.
Amazing. Coming towards my last question, which is the most important thing. Any business, does a business exist? The business at the end of the day exists for making money out of the business, contributing to the environment, contributing to its people, contributing to its investors. How does a balance gets created in this D2C space where profitability is still such a big ask, which has been there for a while now?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the word you're talking about is sustainability. Sustainability to the ecosystem, and the ecosystem, all of us are stakeholders, whether we are as customers or as investors or as the business and the team. I think long term, I do believe that for D2C players that are not creating marketplaces that could, be acquiring customers and have other methodologies, but a lot of the brands are really seeing online and saying, okay, let's do POCs in this year. It has really been about doing pilots and seeing if the internal team can actually, scale those proof of concepts, because it's, it's not fraught without danger or risk. If you don't get it right, it can get significantly wrong. So the right kind of consulting, because the DNAs of the teams also in the organizations are very offline centric. So therefore, I obviously do feel that, partnering, with enablers makes sense in that sense, at least in the, short to mid term, where your first 12 to 18 months, you can understand the teams, you can understand from best in class outside, and then obviously look at further, creating capabilities in house as well over times to come. I do believe that. But yes, getting it right has a few aspects of it. The KPI metrics of the online business has to start right at the outset, which is your customer acquisition part. However, it has to stop only when your orders have completed their entire cycle and money is in the bank from an order. That reconciliation itself for a D2C. So, the Mintras, the Flipkarts have made it easy in some way. They give us our reconciliation statements. So many in-house accounts teams don't understand them, but you kind of realize that, okay, here's an order wise, and you are able to say, okay, fine, goods sold, return, and collection X%, Y, you're done. Check whether you received your returns, life is good. However, in your own D2C, you're investing that marketing money by yourself. You're not a platform. You have to be very conscious of it at as granular as a weekly level, if not more. What is your cost, or what is the percentages when you talk about KPIs? What are the triggers at a weekly level that all portions of this ecosystem are able to say, okay, cost of logistics, return percentage, payment gateway, COD percentage, which shipper should we allocate how much orders to? Now, those are decisions that if the business can be run smart, to be honest, because it's a digital business, you get live data. In any case, the order settlement ratio in your own D2C shouldn't be more than 7 days. So in a week, you should be able to trap any major variations. So much to say, I'll give you a small example, and it might extend, sorry, for 2 minutes, our interaction. But we realized with a large retailer that suddenly we saw, okay, you know what? Our order levels are going very high. And so the marketing team was very happy that suddenly, with the same cost of acquisition, our gross orders have increased. 8 days later, we realized that there were certain intervals in the day in which the order notifications were not going to the consumer. So the customers were not sure, they were replacing orders at the platform. That was showing a higher gross order, but eventually they were getting cancelled at source or were getting RTO'd. So actually it resulted in a P&L loss. It's not just the fact that messages weren't going out, but it gave a very wrong picture. And in those 8 days, marketing got the go ahead to increase their spend. So it's extremely interesting, needs to be done right. That was just a snippet of an example. There is money to be made. There is serious money to be made if done right, through the entire journey. But that framework has to be put in place. So, Green also bets big on understanding that framework over the last 8 to 10 years. So, we never believe that over aggressive is the way to go. Pilot it, do it right, work your proof of concept, work your journeys through, and then scale. We've scaled businesses to 8 CR, 10 CR a month on its own D2C within the 12-month journey itself. So it can be done and can be done right.
Amazing, Naveen. That's amazing. This is so great. I just wish I could continue on this discussion, and I could have continued for the entire day, but due to shortage of time, I'll have to pause it here. But some interesting insights that came from Naveen in terms of one of the first and the most important question, that this is not a bubble. This is here to stay. This business is serious business. It is going to stay. It is only going to become bigger from here. There's so much happening in this space, and the way how Cartmax has been transforming this space. Great job done, Naveen, by you and your team. Thank you so much, Naveen, for being on this episode. Thank you, Mapic, for bringing this interesting topic to us. Thank you again to all the viewers and for coming and seeing this Retail Leadership Series episode 7. Thank you so much from Ranjan Sharma. I'm the CIO and Head of Supply Chain and Captive E-commerce from Bestseller India.
You've been a great host, Ranjan. Thanks, Matic, as well.